All right, welcome back to the Family Section podcast. Tony Mavs with Greg Buttenhorn, rather, of Jazzby, and again, the podcast is presented by Jazzby, the family finance app for kids and families. And Greg, if I'm tagging that improperly, maybe you would like to tag that in some way.
It's all right. We're the debit card for kids and teens, but yeah,
okay,
family
there you go.
finance
Debit
app,
card for
yeah.
kids and teens.
The no fee debit card for kids and teens.
Exactly. Very important detail there. No fee.
Right.
So look, we try to, as I've told you in past episodes, we try to attack, the idea of families in this day and age from a variety of different standpoints or angles. And I know that Greg has a particular, thought regard today for today as it relates to experiences with your kids and how you, again, this sort of gets to how you relate with your kids, Greg. But so give us an idea of what you mean when you say experiences. Are we talking in-house things, outside house things? Like what's on your mind?
Yeah, sure. So it's, you always fill out these profiles of things and it asks you what you learned way too late in life, right? So like I do a lot of interviews and things and they always ask me that. So what did you learn way too late in life? And for me, from a non-business standpoint, it was that for me, life is about experiences and the people that you share them with. And when I say I learned that way too late in life, like, so I grew up with a single mom. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we start talking about some of the experiences that we had. But, my mom busted her ass to make sure that we stayed, middle class, I'll say. But what it meant was that we had everything we needed, but not necessarily everything that we wanted. And Tony, it's, I was thinking about this last night, that the example I always give about this is Reebok pumps from the late 80s.
Sure.
And these were things when they came out, and guys, especially for the younger listeners, when these things came out, they were the thing. And they were, I think, like $130, which in today's money is probably like $250 for a pair of sneakers. And I wanted these things so bad. My mom was like, no way. So when I started having kids, I was like, you know what? I want to make sure my kids get like the coolest stuff, the toys, the in things. And so I started doing this. So my oldest son, and he was younger, and I'd buy him like, all the kids that were 6 years old were into these little plastic things or Yu-Gi-Oh cards or whatever. I'd go on eBay and I'd get him the coolest one and all this stuff. And I started thinking about it as I got older. And I'm like, he's never going to remember that Yu-Gi-Oh card that I bought him when he was 6, but he'll remember that time we took a trip to wherever, right? Or even smaller things that you do as a family or as a group. And so I learned that it was important to spend money on experiences rather than things. And I think as a parent, that's something important to keep in mind, is what your kids are going to remember. And I started it a little late, but we've been getting caught up. So that's kind of a long answer to a short question, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So look, and again, you hear people say that all the time. Don't spend your money on, on items or on things, spend them on experiences, as you just said. And so, like if you were to say to me, the experiences and sometimes they can be sort of one and the same. And when I say that, I mean, you and I, in one of I think it was the first episode that we did, talked about trying to connect with your kids on their level. So sometimes, I'll play video games with them. And honestly, I can only take so much because they move so fast. Like my head starts to spin.
They're better at us, Tony.
Yeah,
video games.
We're not playing, we're not playing in television and Atari like we did when we were kids. So I have trouble with the visuals, but it means something to them for me to do it on their terms. During the winter, I build a hockey rink in the backyard. My younger son really likes to skate. And so I took skating lessons. Like I try to go out there with him when I can. He likes to skate at all hours. So sometimes, I just am not in the mood to go out there. But to me, it's so that it can be smaller things too, Greg, right? And like,
oh yeah,
it's about doing things with them, and even not necessarily. It can be as simple as a board game. And so, and I think it's also important to let them pick. So you get to do something they want to experience, and it means something to them that way, as opposed to trying to shoehorn something down their throat that they really don't want to do.
Yeah, totally. And Tony, what it comes down to is, and I think you said this with a skating example, right? You got to make time to make memories for your kids, right? So that when they get older, they'll talk about the time that dad, built the skating rink in the backyard and went out at 9 o'clock to take shots with them. They won't think about the pair of sneakers you bought them that was, the coolest sneakers ever. So I guess that's the point of kind of what I'm saying, you know?
Oh, definitely. Look, and to your point too, I would say the most memorable thing from my, childhood years, so not to like act like I'm on a sofa here, with a box of Kleenex.
In my day.
Yeah. When I was 7, we took a family trip to Australia, and I remember that. And the reason we went, we were by no means, what I call wealthy, or, we were very middle class, maybe even lower middle class at that time. But both of my parents were immigrants, and, a lot of their families and cousins and whatnot, and in my dad's case, his sister, they were in Australia. They, instead of emigrating from Italy to the United States, ended up in Australia. So, that was one of the 2 primary destinations for whatever reason. So my father wanted to go see his family. My mother had a lot of family over there. She was an only child, but she had a lot of aunts, primarily in Australia. So we went over there, and, that is one that, and I've been back since. I went back as an adult on my own, with my cousin who's my age. But, that I remember. And there are people I remember from Australia. I remember the places we went. There were things like that. But again, if you tell me what pair of sneakers I first wanted, I don't remember that stuff.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. And so, like, so I grew up with a single mom, as I mentioned earlier. And so we didn't have a lot of trips or even really cool experiences when I was a kid. But I'll tell you what I remember. So we, every year, so my mom worked for Digital for tons of years. And every year, one of the things they did is they rented out Canopy Lake Park in New Hampshire. So what I remember is those yearly trips to Canopy Lake and how much I looked forward to them and excited. I can remember sitting in the back of the car, like not being able to wait until we got there. Right. But I'll tell you what else I had, which I'm very lucky about. So, I had a lot of good friends when I was a kid whose parents allowed me in on their experiences. Right. So I had this buddy, his name was Tim, and his dad, this guy, Dick Bovey, he's phenomenal. He's still around. He lives in Boston. But he used to take Tim and his friends to these Holy Cross games. So he was a professor, and he had Holy Cross football season tickets. And Tony, that was back in like the Gordy Lockbaum.
Gordy Lockbaum. I was just going to say that.
Yeah, when Holy Cross was good. And so that's what I remember. I remember going to these football games on Saturdays and just how much fun it was. And going skiing with friends or camping with friends. And that's the stuff when I think back on my childhood that are kind of the warmest memories. There's still songs where I hear them today. And I remember, a camping trip that I was on where I first heard that song. It's amazing. But these are the experiences. This is what I'm saying. And those camping trips didn't cost anything, but it was so much more memorable for me than really anything I had as a kid in terms of toys or whatever. So.
Yeah. And I think, look, those experiences also are about the people, right? It's about who you were with at that particular point in time. And so, and we're not all this way. We're all different. We value different things. But I do think most people remember, who you were with and generally where you were or what you did more than you remember. And I always, I equate this to sports for obvious reasons. So I played a ton of baseball growing up as a kid. I couldn't tell you. I mean, I remember a few years in there where we had pretty good teams. A lot of the other years, I don't remember many of the games at all. But I remember the bus rides. I remember, the people I was with. And who are still my friends to this day, so look, you always remember like winning a championship or something like that. But the lasting stuff comes from the relationships and the experiences that were often off the field or off the court or whatever else. Yeah. So, I mean, that was always my feeling. I don't know whether or not you share that.
So, yeah, I mean, other than, so I was a big high school athlete as well. Other than losing 6-0 to Clinton my senior year in high school that cost us a Super Bowl, I remember that one. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned the bus rides because as soon as you said that, like I'm like, oh gosh, I remember a lot of those bus rides and singing Steve Miller Band with the team on the way to a baseball game or whatever. Yeah, that's stuff that you're totally right. That's the stuff. So Tony, just to kind of to switch gears here. So we talked about being kids with it. So I think you and I have probably both had some really awesome opportunities to do cool things with our kids. What's something really cool that you've been glad you've been able to share with your kids now as an adult?
Well, so selfishly, selfishly, I do like to go out and play golf with them. And, golf's a hard game, right? So, but, my older one in particular, once you start playing a lot, you get a little bit more consistent. They both like playing. Bringing both of them at one time when they were younger was often a challenge. They start the sibling rivalry and the competition and everything else. But once they get to a point where, they're functional, it really is a great thing to share together. You can ride in the cart, talk about things. So it's not really about the golf as much as it is spending time with one another. One thing I've done with each one of them is I took them each to a weekend at spring training when they became teenagers, just me and them, sort of a father-son trip. And again, I let them pick all the stuff we do. I mean, I said, we'll go to a game, we'll do things like that. But if you want to go sit by the pool, we'll do that. You want to go play golf, we'll do that. And so that's one that I really always liked. My second son kind of got screwed a little because of COVID. The spring training didn't go off the way it was supposed to. But in his case, he's a big hockey fan. I'm giving you more than you wanted here, Greg.
No, I like it.
But we did he's a big hockey fan. So I took him to a Bruins Maple Leafs game in Toronto. And I had never been to a hockey game in Canada. He had already been to one at that stage with a hockey team he played on in Montreal. They made a trip to Montreal, but he and I went to Toronto. It was one of his birthday gifts. And saw a game up there, and he had an absolute ball. He loved it. So, awesome. We sort of have this little thing now where we go see games in different cities. We've seen a Blackhawks game in Chicago. He has seen the Canadiens. He's seen the Maple Leafs. We were thinking about doing a Penguins game this year. They've been to a Winter Classic, the one at Gillette Stadium. So we try to just pick experiences like that where we can go out and enjoy it. And some of those were family endeavors too, all of us.
That's awesome. It's funny. You said one of the things that I wanted to hit on in here, and it's, doing things with all the kids or as a family versus kind of one-on-one stuff. So I like a mix of both. I think you have to have some family time and family trips and all that. But I really like to make sure that, at least every few months or whatever, I do something. So again, I've said this before, but I've got 4 kids, and I like to spend time with each one of them kind of independently. And I honestly, for me, and this is, again, something selfish for me, that's where I get the most of anything as a parent, is when I have those one-on-one times with one of my kids, because it happens so rarely. So like this year for football season, I took each one of my kids independently to a Patriots game with me and tried to give each one a cool experience while we were there, to your point, right? And honestly, also unique experiences so that they got something a little bit different than what a sibling got. All of them were cool, but just something a little different that could be just ours. And I'll tell you, one of the coolest things that I've had as a parent is after I brought my daughter, my 16-year-old daughter, to a Patriots game. We sat in a suite this past year, and while we were sitting there, she looked over at me and she goes, "One of the top 5 moments of my life." And I was like, all right, so I'm doing something right as a parent. So those are always cool little feedback that you get.
Well, because look, those one-on-one things, a lot of times it's not even about the event. It's about the fact that they get to be alone with you and they're in charge, Yeah. So it's really empowering to them. And again, because when they're in groups, there's that rivalry thing. And, it's impossible to avoid as a parent that your kids are going to compete with one another for your attention. Yeah. So when you get them alone, it really is a much more enjoyable experience. But like you said, it takes, requires more of your time. It requires effort. And look, the other thing is, I don't mean to make it all about sports either. My older son's into theater. He and I had a trip planned to go to New York and see a show on Broadway when COVID hit. So we had to postpone that, but we've done those as a family too, just to be able to give, we're not all sports all the time. We do try to integrate a little bit of culture, Greg.
So I actually took my oldest daughter to see the Van Gogh immersive experience in Boston recently. So there you go.
Yeah. And so there you go.
I'm actually glad you said that, and I know we need to take a break here, but real quick. So guys, to our listeners, I know we've been talking a lot about some cooler higher end experiences, but there's tons of stuff, and Tony said it earlier, that you can do to build these experiences and memories for your kids, from playing a video game with them to, as Tony mentioned, I do that as well, to playing a board game, to taking a walk with your kids, taking a bike ride with your kids. taking them out to breakfast. So again, I've got lots of friends who would tell you that that's their memory as a kid, is every Sunday morning they'd go with their dad to breakfast, just them and him, and things like that go a long way towards building the relationships that you have with your kids and helping them build memories that they'll tell their kids about one day. So
yeah, it's a good point, Greg, because again, they don't all have to be high end. My kids like mini golf, they like that. I mean, and again, if you do stuff like that with them alone, it's really just about them being with you without any other interference, and allows them to be themselves around you without feeling like they have to live up to some standard that's set by a sibling or set by you, right?
Yeah.
So, because we all say you can't pick your parents, you don't pick your kids either.
Very
so
true.
and they look at you and say, well, I didn't pick you either. I mean, it just kind of, you take what you get, as the saying goes. And so it's really about the attention, right? More than anything else. It's being with them and going out and doing something together that really matters. So in any case, as Greg said, the idea of siblings, Greg, is it fair for me to say that we will be getting a little bit more in depth on that shortly?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when we come back from break, we'll now introduce you to our exciting guest today. Okay,
exactly. And so just hang around in the interim. You can find the Family Section podcast on the podcast page at 985thesportshub.com, also on the Sports Hub app, as well as the Jassby website, jassby.com/podcast, and that's JASSBY for Jassby. It's pronounced like Z's, but it's spelled with S's. And then be sure to check out all the original podcasts available at either 98.5 The Sports Hub, bpodstudios.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the usual places. So take a quick break. When we come back, a guest joins us on the Family Section podcast.
As promised, we have an exciting guest for you. We're talking about experiences today, and I can't think of someone better to talk about some cool experiences than this guy. We have Kevin Harris. He was the executive producer of The Apprentice, both the Trump version and the Martha Stewart version. He's also produced some other shows you may have heard of: Eco Challenge, American Chainsaw, Design Star, The Casino, a bunch of others. He's also a dad, and he also happens to be my brother. So interestingly enough. So please welcome Kevin Harris to the Family Section. And it's a true family section today, I guess.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome, Kevin. So Tony and I spent the first segment here talking about just cool experiences we've had, both as kids as well as adults with our kids. And I know you like to focus on cool experiences with your son as well, and that's really a big focus for you. So why don't you tell us about a couple of cool things that you like to do with your son to make sure that he has those lasting memories as an adult?
Well, I guess the thing we're doing right now quite a bit is we got season passes to Disneyland, and when you get the season pass, and we're only like 30 minutes away, so we can literally just go to dinner at Disneyland and spend an hour and eat dinner and then come home, and it's no big deal because we have a season pass. So we've been doing that quite a bit now because they're reopened and the crowds aren't so big because of the pandemic and stuff like that. So we enjoy doing that right now. So we haven't done a lot of traveling. I think the last time we traveled for an experience was out to Cape Cod with you, actually.
Oh, yeah. Every year. See, that's a cool family experience. Our kids will remember that.
Yeah, he really enjoys that, to hang out with his cousins out there at Cape Cod. And from California, going to Cape Cod is actually kind of cool. It is there too, but for here, it's like, whoa, you're going to the Cape. Wow. Because not many people from California, make the trek all the way to the East Coast. Hawaii's the same distance and gets more of the California travelers. That's for sure.
Hawaii's a little cooler than the Cape. Is that what you're saying?
Not for me. I like the Cape. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. So, as you started talking, what I was thinking about for you is the Manhattan Beach pumpkin races that you guys do every year. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and kind of how that's become like a father-son event for you guys?
Yeah. We started, I don't know, 6 years ago, and I'm pretty competitive like you, Greg. So So when these pumpkin races came up and we did the first one, you know, I was drinking the Kool-Aid, you know, so I had to do it over and over again to try to win. So we just spent more and more time, you know, Nico and I developing our pumpkin and trying to make it faster every single year. So far we haven't won. We have made the finals, but we haven't won. But you know, 500 or 600 pumpkins in her, so it's not too bad to be in the final 8.
Sure,
yeah.
But
so what's a pumpkin race? You have to like roll it down a hill or something?
Yeah. They've been doing it here for like 30 years in Manhattan Beach, and there's a hill right before our pier at the, you know, right onto the ocean, and it's quite a steep hill, and they close it all off, and they have a DJ and, you know, crowds, and it goes on all day long. And there's like, first you have to do qualifying, and once you win your qualifying, then you go into the, you know, quarterfinals and the semifinals, and there's a big trophy you win. I mean, they make a huge day out of it. So it's basically, there's rules. So the pumpkin has to be a certain size, and then you have to put a double axle that do not connect. So this way you actually have to get the axle straight to make the pumpkin go straight down the hill.
Oh, so it's got wheels.
Wheels,
oh,
yeah, there's wheels on it.
Tony, think you know the Pinewood Derby.
I was just going to say this, Greg. So it's like the old Cub Scout thing.
It's the Pinewood Derby on steroids, is what.
Yes.
Okay, but no track. Like, you just roll it down the street.
Straight down the street. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
and is this the big dock at Manhattan Beach? That's like right on the main drag there by the Strand.
Right. Yep. Right there. That hill,
I was
right
just there.
You were.
Yeah.
I was just there.
Why didn't you tell
I
me?
know this hill that it absolutely feeds right down into that dock.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, you just throw them down there, and they smash into a, you know, at the end they smash into a huge, you know, like padded wall, and most of the time, most of them don't go straight. Most of the pumpkins go sideways and roll and everything. So if you can get a straight pumpkin, you know, you could do pretty good.
Tony, this thing is an event. Like it's
so forgive me. So like now I'm into this. Okay, so like there's got to be a restriction, right? Because obviously gravity's a factor when you're going downhill, and weight's a factor. Yeah. So there's got to be a maximum weight on the pumpkin. And I would imagine, like that old Pinewood Derby that you were talking about, Greg, you must have to, like, you know, put certain things to, like, you know, I don't want to say cheats on the pumpkin, but yeah, you put weights on the bottom of the Pinewood Derby car to make it a certain weight, and then you had to weigh it, and so there's probably all of those restrictions, right?
Yeah, you can't weight it down. And before you race, they have like, you know, those like where you can shove that thing into the watermelon that kind of pulls out the sample.
Yeah.
You know? They do that to your pumpkin on the bottom of it to make sure, number one, it's a pumpkin, because after you paint it, you know, and number two, that there's nothing, you know, like there's no cement inside or brick inside or anything, you know.
Got it.
So they do that to it first to make sure you're actually, you know, a pumpkin that can compete. And it has to be, it can't be, you know, it has to be a certain size, a round diameter, and the wheels have to be a certain size. You can't just put, like, you know, bicycle wheels on it. I think there's a certain dimension that they have to be. So there's a set of rules. Your axles cannot be connected, because people were doing that to make it go straight. They kind of want the kids to have a shot at, you know, actually drilling those axles and competing against each other. It's typically intended to be a kid's thing.
and Tony, if I had to guess, I would say that Kevin Harris is the Bill Belichick of the Manhattan Beach pumpkin races. I guarantee you he knows every rule and how to get just enough up against it that he gets every advantage he can get.
Videotaping the opposition, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly.
I do study I do study.
If there's a special bearing he can buy out of, like, Yugoslavia, he's buying that bearing.
Yeah. I bought these shark wheels. They're called shark wheels. They're skateboard wheels, and they're legal because of the size of them. But the way that the track works, it kind of, or the wheel, it kind of has it's a straight wheel, but on it has these, like, you know, the tread kind of does this, and it's what
Kevin. It's a podcast. People don't know what this is.
Oh, like waving, you know, the tread on the tires. Yeah. And so when it goes down the hill, it picks up speed. That's what it's meant to do. So, and they're legal. And every time I race, you know, the host or the DJ, the thing always calls out my wheels. But I get beat every year. So
there's always next year.
No, it's a tactical loophole. He found a loophole that allows him to add speed to the vehicle.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like auto. How old is your son, Kevin? You said his name's Nico?
Nico, yeah, he's 11.
Perfect age for that stuff.
He's the youngest of all the cousins.
So, and I will say this, and I'm not just saying this because Kevin's on the show. He's probably, Tony, the best dad that I've ever met. Like, this guy makes sure that his son is always number one in everything that he does. And they do a ton of cool stuff together. The show's not long enough to go into all of it, but they do a lot of really fun father-son stuff. And this kid's going to have some cool memories when he gets older. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, my Instagram is full on he and I and our adventures on everything. You know, like take a picture every place we go and post it up. Everybody just loves watching our adventures.
So, Kevin, is he fully aware of what you do? Like, and again, I'm just going by what Greg said, but that you were the executive producer of The Apprentice. Like, you know, these are wildly popular shows and endeavors that you're involved in. Is your son sort of like, and when I say aware of it, you know what I mean? Does he like, does it mean anything to him? He's like, yeah, my father does this.
Yeah, I mean, I think he kind of is at the latter, you know, like, yeah. He knows and he understands. And, you know, clearly from The Apprentice, that's become a whole different conversation amongst anybody who wants to talk about it because of my relationship I had with Trump, obviously. So, and he understands that. He understands who Trump was, you know, who my relationship with him was, you know, what my feelings are on it and the whole, you know, the whole thing. So, but it doesn't seem to like, you know, it's not blowing him away by no means.
Yeah.
You know?
But you gotta remember, Tony, this kid lives in LA versus, you know, like your kid's in Boston. It's a little different. Like, you know, there's not a Tony Maserati around every corner, but for in LA, there's, you know, Kevin Harris's are, you know, they're a little bit more abundant.
Yeah, like, I mean, we were at ice cream the other day and Vince Vaughn is standing in line next to us, you know. He lives in Manhattan Beach too. So he's around quite a bit and you just see him and almost becomes regular. Oh, it's Vince, you know. Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, you know, we're all people, right? It's the one thing we have in common.
We are. Yeah, we are. Yeah.
So speaking of the Trump experiences, so you've done a lot of really cool shows with a lot of cool people. Actually, I'd love to eventually have the Machine Jesse Green be a guest in our podcast from American Chainsaw. But I want to, you know, for our listeners, the ones that are going to know the most are obviously Donald Trump and Martha Stewart. So I know you get asked about Donald Trump a lot, but you had an opportunity to have some really cool life experiences, obviously shooting these shows. I can tell you just from my perspective, I had a lot of cool experiences because you shot these shows. So it made a lot of fun for me when I'd go visit you in New York and you were shooting and all that fun stuff. But why don't you tell us kind of a cool Trump and or a cool Martha Stewart story that you'll remember for the rest of your life as a cool experience?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, maybe the best one for your audience or your locale with Boston is my Tom Brady story. I actually have a pretty funny Tom Brady story. So one day I go into Trump's office and, you know, just talking about what we're going to shoot for the day. And he says, "Hey, what do you think of Tom Brady?" And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, he's a great quarterback. You know, why are you asking? He goes, "I want to get him on the show." And I'm like, "Oh, well, yeah, it'd be great. If we can get Tom Brady on The Apprentice, it'd be awesome." He goes, "Yeah, maybe he can be like a special guest or something." And I'm like, yeah. And then he's like, "Yeah, and I'm trying to get him to date Ivanka." And this was prior to Giselle, you know.
This was the early 2000s, I believe,
yeah,
right after the first right around the first Super Bowl.
We'll make sure. Yeah, he was single at the time.
Yeah.
So anyway, he says, "Hey, here's Tom's, you know, number. He's expecting your call." And I'm like, oh, Jesus, all right. So he gives me his cell number and I call up Tom Brady and Tom Brady picks up the phone. And I'm like, "Hey, you know, I'm Kevin from The Apprentice, you know, just talked to Donald and he indicated that you might want to be on the show." And he's like, "Well, you know, the truth of the matter is, as you can understand," and I think they were still in training at the time, but they were prepping for the season. If I remember correctly, we were shooting in around April, May, you know?
Okay.
So I was like, "Well, yeah, it'd be great." And he says, "But I don't have a lot of time to get to New York. As you can imagine, I'm quite busy." And I said, "Yeah, for sure." And he says, "Well, tell you what, how about if I send you a few signed jerseys, and then if I can work out the schedule, we'll work it out." And I'm like, "All right, yeah, sounds good. I'll get some, you know, we'll get some signed jerseys." So he sent me 4 signed jerseys down to New York because he couldn't come himself. Ended up giving one to Greg. He's got it on his wall.
It's still hanging up. Love that thing.
Gave away the others because I'm a Seattle Seahawk fan, unfortunately. So
my wife's from Seattle. Yeah, we have Seattle fans in this house too.
Do you right? So I wasn't. I mean, I respect Tom a lot, but I didn't put up his signed jersey on my wall. That's for sure.
Well, no, and and as you know, he ended up marrying someone other than Trump's daughter.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That would have been would have been an interesting marriage.
Wow. So imagine that Brady literally could have been, had access to the White House there for a period of time, I suppose.
I'm sure he still could have if he wanted to.
Oh yeah, I mean on a regular basis. In theory, he could have been part of the daily briefings down there.
Yeah.
Actually, you reminded me of something else. Speaking about marrying into the Trump family, Kevin, you were at Trump's wedding to Melania, correct?
It was, yeah. That was a wild experience. Yeah, yeah. We flew down on Mark Burnett's private jet, which was quite fun to fly on. If you've never been on one of those, it's pretty wild. And then went to the we went to the ceremony and to the reception. He built a whole convention center at the Mar-a-Lago just for his wedding, so we could have a big enough party there. But one of the guests that we still talk about when we went, I went with my wife at the time, and is we met the Clintons. The Clintons were there, which was quite funny because he pretended like they were his enemies, and they were at his wedding. So he was more friends with them than
politics for you.
Yeah, yeah, and Shaq, and the celebrity lineup was pretty heavy, and it was a pretty wild, huge, massive wedding. Heidi Klum sat right in front of me. I didn't recognize her. My wife did. That's Heidi Klum. I'm like, Heidi Klum, really? Sure as shit, there was Heidi Klum. Oh, we can say that, right?
Yes, you can say it. Totally fine. 100% allowed.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was the wedding was pretty wild, and then we were relieving, his plane. Trump has at the time had a 727, and his pilot, who I was friends with, just from the show, he clipped the wing of Trump's plane into a G5 or G4 down there in Palm, whatever that airport down there, and then so Trump couldn't fly back on his plane, so he had to rent a plane to fly back up to New York.
Oh, that is so
great. Gotta love it.
That is so great.
All right. So actually, just it's kind of a segue here. So one of the cool experiences I had, Tony, talking about golf, was when Trump opened Trump National in Los Angeles. Before it opened to the public, Kevin and I got to go out there and play it. Still to this day, by far the nicest golf course I've ever been on. It was not nice to me. I did not play my best golf that day, but I blame the borrowed clubs. I think I borrowed one of Kevin's sets of clubs, so that's why. But great golf course.
It is.
So Kevin, how long ago was the Apprentice? Like I'm trying to think of the timeline now. That's been a while, right?
Yeah. I mean, I did it through 2006. So from basically 99 to 2006.
Okay. So your son wasn't even born at that time.
He wasn't. No.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yeah, so he wasn't out in New York with us when we were out there the whole time. We'd be out there for 6 months a year. So 3 months there, 3 months back in LA, 3 months out there, 3 months back here.
Yeah.
We were doing 40 episodes a year.
Yeah, right. Go ahead, Greg. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say it was good for me. I got to see him a lot more than I do now. So
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I snuck up your wedding during that.
If we could ask before we wrap up, if we could ask just what are you doing now?
I don't know.
That's all right. You can talk about it. It's in California. It's all good.
Well, what I went through the process of selling other shows, and I ended up making my own show, American Chainsaw, for National Geographic after The Apprentice. Did a bunch of other shows, and finally got to the point where I decided I wanted to take a different path. And I had my mother had just gone through breast cancer, and I had made some cannabis edibles for her during that time, which she really loved, and then she encouraged me to do it in a bigger scale. So I got 2 cannabis licenses and launched basically the only licensed cannabis bakery in Los Angeles.
Oh wow!
And now we sell our cookies and cookie dough all across the state here in California.
Fabulous! Yeah. Wow, so that's a massive career change.
Yeah, it is. I still am in the television business. Like I just sold a show. But I'm taking passive, roles on them because of my involvement in the cannabis business now. So, I would like to get back onto the front line of shooting television now that's kind of opening up You know, but since the pandemic, it really slowed it down, but it's opening up nicely now. So who knows? We'll see how it works. So I'm dabbling in that business and television still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will tell you. So Kevin and I actually had some fun, and we've done a couple. We tried to do a couple projects together for television, and it's a nasty business. Like it is.
Yeah.
It's so hard, and like you could have the best show ever that never sees the light of day, and you can have the worst show ever that ends up on air. Like it's a nasty business.
Yeah,
really
yeah,
is.
we did one together, a dance project that was just like it was almost a layup in television. You know,
it was phenomenal.
Phenomenal. The characters were amazing. The backdrop was amazing, and we couldn't get it sold. You know, just weird how that works. But you catch those buyers at the networks at the wrong day, the wrong time, or the wrong anything, and you know you're done.
Yeah.
So real quick, and we'll probably have to edit out some of that the pumpkin race coverage, unfortunately. But I want to ask you, and everybody asks you about Trump stories. Give us a good Martha Stewart story.
Martha Stewart, you know, Martha Stewart and Trump were completely different. Martha Stewart had been involved in television quite a bit. She was, she had a switch where Trump didn't have a switch. Trump was Trump. No matter if the camera's on or camera's off. Martha had a switch, so every time the cameras would turn on, she would be like, you know, turn into the, you know, the Martha Stewart you see on her cooking television show. When the camera's turned off, then she would turn into the exactly what you think Martha Stewart is, you know, barking out orders and demanding stuff and this kind of stuff. So we always tried to roll the cameras no matter what. And I would just radio to the crew to get out of shot, you know, because we're rolling and she doesn't know, you know. So that's the kind of way we would get some golden nuggets out of it. But one time we mic'd her, and she, you know, she would wear her mic on her ankle, and then we'd run the cable all the way up her and you know, and lob her up here. And so we lobbed her up, and then we walked out, and she started talking shit about us, which was quite funny because we just mic'd her. And I thought, gosh, a television personality who's forgotten that we've just mic'd her is quite funny. She was way more challenging than Trump, I'd have to say.
See, that's amazing to me. I know you told me that before. That's amazing. And I will tell you, she didn't forget. She just didn't care. That's my guess.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, but as far as Martha Stewart goes, one of my best experiences with her is that we were working on, you know, going over what we were going to shoot for the day. I was out at her Bedford house, and we're sitting at her table, dining room table, and she says, "Kevin," she says, "do you want a cappuccino?" And I'm like, "The Martha Stewart cappuccino?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah, I'll have a cappuccino." And I'm thinking she's going to bark out, you know, to one of the help to make a cappuccino, and she stands up and walks over to the cappuccino and starts, you know, frothing me a cappuccino. And I thought, holy cow, I'm going to get a Martha Stewart made cappuccino.
Right.
Can't beat that.
An actual Martha Stewart cappuccino.
Yeah.
Like she's going to make it.
She's going to make it for me. Yeah. And she did. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
It would have had to have been.
Yeah.
So I thought you were going to say that you thought she was going to have one of her people make it or whatever. I thought you were going to say she sent her people out to Starbucks to go get it and bring it back for you. Like, yeah, she bought me a Starbucks cappuccino or a latte or whatever, you know?
That's great.
Yeah. You want a cappuccino? Hey, can you run down to Starbucks?
Yeah.
That's where I thought you were going with that for sure.
Yeah.
Even better, she puts in one of those like K-pods into a Keurig. It's like, yeah, here you go. Even better.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I found myself actually worrying about my outfit every time I would go to work with Martha, whereas Trump, I didn't care what I wore, which was totally funny.
So one of the it's funny. One of the things is because you mentioned that, I know we need to go, but one of the things that you had mentioned, you know, so talk about the outfits. So Donald Trump did an interview for Time magazine years ago, and it was like one of those Christmas holiday magazines where like, this is what everybody's buying for Christmas presents. And one of the things he had said there was he was going to buy Kevin Harris, the producer of The Apprentice, a suit because he didn't think he had one. So maybe you should have paid a little more attention to what you were wearing around Donald Trump. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Well, you sound like my kind of guy, Kevin. If you're not wearing suits. So,
I literally had to put on even the collar shirt for you guys.
Oh, nice. Thanks. Appreciate that, buddy.
Yeah, step up. Well, believe, as you can see, it's not like we're going out of our way here either.
Yeah, rocking the hat.
Well, listen, thank you for your time. I don't know if Greg has anything else he wanted to toss in there, but we appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one, you guys.
You
Thanks
too.
for having me on.
Too. And to our listeners, again, just a reminder that you can find the Family Section podcast on the podcast page of 985thesportshub.com, also on the 985 The Sports Hub app, as well as at jassby.com, and that's jassby.com/podcast. And while you're on the Sports Hub page, at least, you can check out all the other original podcasts available from Boston's Home for Sports, and that is 98.5. Podcasts are also available at bpodstudios.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the usual suspects. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you the next time on the Family Section.